What you want to look for when you're maintaining your garden space is two things. You want to see if there's any pests. Are there holes in your leaves? Are you seeing bugs or beetles kind of crawling across the surface of your plants? Are you seeing discoloration in your garden? These are all signs that something's going wrong. This broccoli leaf is full of mealybugs. What you could do, because there's a lot of them, is just take that leaf and remove it from the plant. It removes most of the bugs along with it. And in some cases, that's going to be easy peasy to do. You just take a couple leaves off that have some of the bugs present on them. This cabbage here is completely overrun with the bugs. And that's going to be hard to get rid of. That's going to be hard to try and remove manually. So the best bet that you have to make sure that those bugs don't spread to other parts of the garden is to just remove the plant entirely. Because having this many bugs in your garden is a risk to all of your plants. I'm just looking to see, because in the soil you might be able to find worms or grubs, and that's another indicator that, something might be wrong. And there's tons of different ways that you can go about, challenging pests in your garden. One of the ways is by having flowers in your space. It attracts pollinators. And some of those pollinators, like wasps or yellow jackets, they will actually attack other pests. And even then, by having certain plants like basil, for example, it does flower, but it also has a heavy scent to it. Certain moths don't like the scent of basil, so they won't come and lay their eggs on the plant leaves. There's certain plants that go good together, there's certain plants that don't go good together, and it's very up to each individual garden on how you do it. Marigolds, however, are usually a very good plant to have. Before you go and reach for your pesticide spray or your soil mix or any of that kind of stuff, you want to think, okay, how else can I deal with these pests before I go directly to any kind of chemical or even botanical pesticide? There's so many options, and there's a complete category of lists called IPM, or Integrated Pest Management. And it takes all of these kind of natural or simple kind of ways on how to deal with pests in an easy way. And it's a step-by-step process that you kind of work your way down based on what you have in your garden. There are 3 different methods that are highly recommended when dealing with pests in the integrated pest management structure. And that is cultural control, physical control, and genetic control. So cultural control would look like crop rotations. In this bed we have brassicas, so broccoli, cabbage. Brassicas are targeted usually by pests in the soil, so cabbage bugs, cabbage beetles, grubs that will eat the roots, as well as other pests. But that's something that can sit in the soil over winter. So if you have a bed full of brassicas, if you decided you wanted a bunch of cabbage this year, you don't want to go and plant that same garden bed full of cabbage the next year. So you want to rotate your crops. You want to put something different in here that, cabbage bugs won't want to eat. And that's one way that you can look at cultural control. Another way is watering. How much are you watering? When are you watering? Usually a good suggestion for watering your garden is to wait every couple days and then soak the beds. And that will draw out any pests in the soil and keep them from sitting on the leaves or in the roots. Having that heavy watering on top of the plants with good rainfall, or if you have a sprinkler system, having that good coverage on top of the plants will blow any pests from the leaves, but it will also draw out anything from in the soil because of the amount of water that you're putting in. Another good method for physical control is before you plant your garden, digging up the dirt to make sure anything in the soil is dislodged, is exposed to the elements so it doesn't sit there and grow into an infestation. Finally, you have genetic control, which is usually talking about the types of plants that you have. So that could be companion planting with the marigolds. That could look like resistant variants. So when you go to the store and you're looking at your tomato plants, you want something that's resistant against, say, tomato hornworms. And they do have some of those varieties available, but that might not always be an option depending on where you shop and what it is exactly you're looking for.
White chochaitip, Emma Gottfredson and Squawkst, to Alquin. Today I will be teaching you words in Sequatmach from our video. La eska so Let to chochai to stem. Let to chochai to stem. Let to chochai to stem. Sulentsum. Sulentsum.
Another way you can kind of look at pests and pest management in a greener or more environmentally friendly way is looking at botanical pest sprays. So those sprays are usually made from naturally occurring plants like basil or garlic, or using plant-friendly and environmentally friendly resources like dish soap and vegetable oil. For example, a really good insect spray or insect repellent is a basil-based spray. And that's taking 4 cups of water, a cup of basil or a couple tablespoons of dried basil, a teaspoon of dishwashing soap, and steaming and boiling those leaves until they're nice and soft, and all of that essence and that odor from the basil, that strong basil smell, is kind of seeped into the water. After you boil that, you strain the leaves out, you put in your dish soap, and you mix that up, and you can put it into just a little spray bottle from the dollar store or from your local home hardware store, if you will. And it just fits in a bottle, and you can just spray it across your plants, just like so. And this kind of topical spray, it's not going to keep them off forever, but it's going to deter them. They're not going to settle in as much. They're not going to rip apart your plants in a hunger. Just spraying it liberally over the leaves every few days is something that could definitely help keep pests out of your garden. There's a few different recipes out there. One of the ones that I personally use is actually an insecticidal soap, which is, it's super simple to make, and you take water, dish soap, and vegetable oil, and when you mix that in a bottle, it kind of stops pests from resting so long. A lot of these smaller bugs, they won't be able to lay their eggs on the leaves, or they won't be able to stick around and eat the leaves as much because of the oil residue that sits on the top of the plant. Another good one for fungus infections is chamomile. So taking fresh chamomile or dried chamomile and steeping that in boiling water for a period of time, taking the leaves out or taking the tea out, and then putting that in a bottle and applying it to any fungal areas on your plant. If you're noticing some bacteria or some fungus growing on the base of your plant or on the leaves, powdery mildew on most squash plants, for example, you can spray that chamomile on top and it should combat the fungus growing on your plants. Garlic is another one, and touching back on companion planting, garlic is a great thing to have in your garden because the strong scent from the garlic also keeps pests away. So just planting bulbs in between your plants. Garlic, some variants of onion, they do the same thing. But making that into a spray by crushing the garlic, boiling the garlic, adding dish soap to it, and then putting it in a bottle. That's just one more recipe that you can use to keep pests out of your garden in a safe way. It's good for kids, it's good for the environment, and most importantly, it's good for pollinators. Something to consider when you're going through your garden and you're looking for things that maybe you want to check up on, you want to maintain, is how big your plants are getting. Because at some point, they start growing so big that it's not really helping the plant. So you're going to want to try and prune it back, especially say if one branch has already produced fruit. You want to snip the parts that are already spent so that instead of the plant pouring energy into these dead branches that are just producing leaves, they can instead redirect that energy into producing flowers and more fruit. There's a lot of overhang here, and that's not always good if your fruit's dropping to the ground like the sides of this bush here. So, that's something you want to kind of look at when you're going through your plants in your garden as well, is just making sure that what you are keeping is going to be beneficial to the plant and your garden, instead of this, because of how weak the stem is right here and how it's just about half broken through. That's going to be something it's not going to survive much longer. So maybe a couple days from now, it'll turn brown and start dying off. So we could just right up at the joint once more, snip that off, and now you won't have to worry about this. And then this shoot can keep growing up and do some flowering, and you'll have nice, beautiful red tomatoes on that branch. On the topic of pests, you also have to be considerate of other plants that you have growing in your garden that you may not want to be there. For one of the more common weeds is lamb's quarter. In this garden space, we have a little bit of a surprise as a weed here, and that is all of this mint. Now, mint is an incredibly fast-growing plant, and it's usually very adaptable to its environment. And all of this, all around me, is mint. There's so much mint around that it's kind of outcompeting everything else in the area. So this is something, you want to consider. If you do plant mint in your garden, you're going to want to watch it. You're going to want to monitor it to make sure it doesn't go out of hand like this, because it could just take over all of your plants. And although it smells absolutely delicious and can be used in many things, when that's all you're growing in your garden, you're gonna want to be a huge fan of mint.